You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. My co-host today is Bob Trapani Jr., historian, author, photographer, aids to navigation technician, and executive director of the American Lighthouse Foundation. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Jeremy. It is great to be back, and I'm looking forward to talking about Goat Island again today. Awesome.
Yeah, me too. So this is January 29th, 2023, and this is episode 210 of Lighthearted. Very shortly, we will hear part two of a two-part interview about Goat Island Light Station on the southern Maine coast. Before we get to that, I was thinking of something I wanted to clarify. This podcast is produced by the United States Lighthouse Society, of course, but you are executive director of the American Lighthouse Foundation. People get the two organizations confused. They are not the same organization. Bob, could you possibly give a little brief history of the American Lighthouse Foundation and about your involvement with it?
I sure can, Jeremy. The American Lighthouse Foundation was actually founded as the New England Lighthouse Foundation in 1994. And its purpose was to set out and actually get involved with restoring light stations, historic light stations. And our first project was in 1995 at Race Point Light Station on Cape Cod. And at that point, we achieved the restoration of that station within the 3-year period that the Coast Guard had asked us to do. And by 1998, it eventually opened as an overnight stay, popular one at that. And then with that, eventually came a number more lighthouses that were licensed by the U.S. Coast Guard to the American Lighthouse Foundation. We changed our name to the American Lighthouse Foundation in 2000 to kind of reflect the larger influence that the organization was seeking to have and also having in different areas. And also, one of the strengths of our organization was the formation of what we call chapters. And so these are people in their community who care about their particular lighthouse, and of course, lighthouses more in general, but they really like their lighthouse in their community. And for those lighthouses that we have chapters for, it's been a great success in watching these people really have that passion for the project and make some big things happen over these places over the years. I became director in 2005, so 18 years in this position. And it's just been a joy to work with people like you. We've seen a lot, learned a lot, met a lot of great people. And I think, not only are we impacting lighthouses, but we are impacting people. And I think that's as much important, especially in, one day down the line when we all hand this baton off to somebody else. I think how we impact people now really matters.
Very well said. And I just want to point out, you've been on the podcast a bunch of times, but you were in one of the very first episodes. In fact, when I decided to do the podcast, you were the first person I interviewed.
Oh, that's right.
It wasn't using the first episode. I forget which number it was. It was a little bit into it, but you were the first interview, and you did go into some more detail about the history of the American Lighthouse Foundation. So I'll refer people to that if they want to hear more. And also, of course, the website, lighthousefoundation.org. You can learn a lot more there. Personally, I've been involved with both the American Lighthouse Foundation and the U.S. Lighthouse Society for a long time. I joined the board of directors of the American Lighthouse Foundation in the late 1990s. I've been the president for a couple of different stretches. I founded the Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses as a chapter back in 2001. And meanwhile, over the years, I've written many articles for the U.S. Lighthouse Society's magazine, The Keeper's Log. And I joined the staff of the U.S. Lighthouse Society as historian 3 years ago, a little more than that. There is no competition between the American Lighthouse Foundation and the U.S. Lighthouse Society. We're very much all on the same team.
Oh, we sure are, Jeremy. The team of lighthouse preservation will welcome anyone with open arms. It's just the mission is just too big for any one organization. And yeah, we're all on the same team. We all care. We all want to do positive for the lights. And we want to, like I said earlier, we want to make sure we're impacting people. So that's a big job, and the more the merrier. It's great.
Agreed. As I mentioned, today we're going to hear part two of our two-part interview with three people about Goat Island Light Station and Cape Porpoise in southern Maine. It is not, I'd say, one of your really iconic tall lighthouse towers, but Goat Island is very attractive in its own way, I think, and it's very important historically.
It sure is, Jeremy. And I think, when you look at Goat Island, it is a classic harbor light. And I think that's awesome because when you think of the classic seacoast lights, they were actually guiding ships, along their way on a journey. But for a lighthouse like Goat Island, it was pointing the way home. And I think there's a story for those harbor lights to be had, that it was such an important part of the maritime community in those harbor areas. So for certain, Goat Island, I think another one of the beautiful things with Goat Island is that for an offshore lighthouse, you can be on land and get a reasonably good view of the lighthouse, which actually is a positive because a lot of offshore lights, many people can't see. And so it's hard to place all that in context. But with Goat Island, it's offshore and you can see it. And I just think it's the best of all worlds there for an offshore lighthouse.
Yeah. I believe it's in the neighborhood of 3/4 of a mile offshore, give or take a few feet. You and I have visited Goat Island together a couple of times, I believe. And another one of my visits there over the years was with the late Candace Clifford, who you also knew, Bob. She was an author and researcher and historian for the U.S. Lighthouse Society. So that was a memorable day as well. With the light station at the entrance to the harbor and I'd say a pretty substantial lobstering fleet for a small harbor there. I think that Cape Porpoise Harbor is really one of the more picturesque small harbors on the Maine coast.
It really is, and part of the charm of that is when you're seeing that lighthouse, or if you're trying to go from the mainland out to the island, you're getting to see a working waterfront there, which I think is great and puts more context into why lighthouses we feel are still important today. But yeah, the maritime connections, they're all threads that bind this fabric that we just so much love. It's lighthouses, it's the lobstering industry, it's so much of the waterfront and the harbor areas that, yeah, we just can't get enough of it. And Cape Porpoise and Goat Island Lighthouse, it's a hand in glove fit.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting combination of a working harbor there, working waterfront, and tourism. With a couple of restaurants there at the end of Pier Road, and the parking area there gets more than full almost every day from spring through fall. It can be a little hard to find a parking space there. But yet at the same time, I think part of the attraction is the fact that you've got a lobster fleet there. You've got lobstermen landing their catch right there. The harbor master's office is right there. So it's an interesting combination of tourism and traditional work there.
It sure is, and I know you've seen the same. But I've been there in the summertime, and you mentioned tourism, and watching people be able to sit on the benches or on the rocks and just relax and look out at the lighthouse. I think that's really special too. It is. You're fortunate to get a parking space down in that area, but if you can, what a view! Yeah.
I used to bring tours there when I was doing van tours, tours of my minivan for 11 years. I would go there sometimes and often have to wait for a parking space. So I have plenty of experience with that. So let's talk a little bit more about Goat Island before part 2 of our interview. So if you could just help me kind of recap some background about Goat Island.
Sure, Jeremy. Goat Island Light Station was established in 1833 to help guide mariners into the busy harbor at Cape Porpoise. In 1859, the present tower and house were built. When it was rebuilt that year, a 5th order Fresnel lens was installed.
In 1990, Goat Island became one of the last light stations in the United States to be automated. Since 1998, the property has been owned and managed by the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. The trust is dedicated to preserving land for use by current and future generations and has conserved over 2,800 acres of land from development.
There are 3 guests in today's interview. Scott and Karen Dombrowski have been the primary caretakers of Goat Island for the trust for about 30 years. And Tom Bradbury is the executive director of the trust.
That's right. You and I went to the headquarters of the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust a few weeks ago to record this conversation. With your knowledge of lighthouses, Bob, and the Maine coast, you brought a lot to the interview, so thank you very much for that. Let's listen to part 2 of our conversation about Goat Island Light Station in Maine now. I know there was the history of shipwrecks around the island. We talked about that a little bit, boat accidents and so forth, obviously. Anything else? And Tom alluded to the fact that Karen and Scott, you were involved in rescues over the years. Anything you want to say about all that subject?
After living out there, we could certainly see that the plea of the people of Cape Porpoise to keep it manned had some merit. Because I would say, let's see, we're just about at 30 years now, and I'd say 25 out of the 30 years we've been involved with helping people, whether it be piloting them into a safe mooring space during foggy or stormy periods. We've had boats catch fire, boats go up on the rocks. There was one time there was a plane crash with 6 passengers, I think 4 passengers and the pilot and the co-pilot, that had occurred about a mile off of Goat Island. What we see a lot more so now is because there are so many small boaters and especially kayakers, a lot of times they are not experienced to be doing what they're doing. And when you go to the ocean side of Goat Island, there are ledges that create quite some situations where the water washes back and will capsize or twirl a canoe or a kayak around. And, I've had, I think, probably the most significant thing in more recent times was I was giving a tour up on the lawn, and I was talking to people, and this gentleman crawls up soaking wet over the rocks, and he walks up to me and he says, I lost my buddy. And I said, where were you? And the conditions were not such that anyone should have been on the outside of the harbor in a kayak, but he said that he was next to his buddy and they got into some swells, and then he turned and looked and couldn't find him. So in this instance, I immediately excused myself, went and got a VHF radio and my cell phone and binoculars and headed up into the tower and started with 911 and started a search pattern with the binoculars. And fortunately, I was able to locate this person, and they did stay with their kayak, but it was too dangerous to go out. Even the boat that the town had, they couldn't go out to assist. And I kept an eye on them, and I stayed on the radio with Marine Patrol and with the local fire department, and could eventually see that if he could hold on to the boat and hold on long enough without getting hypothermic, that he was going to wash up onto one of the islands. And it was a low tide, and I was able to direct the rescue people out onto the island and where he had washed up, and they were able to get him off and get him to the hospital. And fortunately, he didn't suffer any major injuries or anything else. And quite honestly, after I met him the following year, I thought he took the thing way too lightly. He was really joking about it, and he just does not realize how close he came to not coming home that night.
Perhaps Scott could tell you about how he and Karen assisted a young man that was lost off the island around Christmas time.
Oh, yes. This one didn't have a very good ending. There were 2 young men that they used to visit us out on Goat Island. They went to the landing boat school, and they were getting ready to go home for the Christmas holidays, and they got together and had themselves their own little Christmas party and decided to go down to the shoreline, grab a couple of kayaks, and go for one last paddle before they left. Their other 2 buddies, they all shared a house together. They went off to bed, and these other 2 guys never came home. So we heard the helicopters the next morning, and it sounded reminiscent of when we were searching for Dick and started to seek out just what happened. And I went out immediately and started to look around to see if there was any indication. I had the Masons working out there, and they had seen 2 kayaks washed up on a spit of land over on the island, Folly Island, across the channel, and didn't know what came of those. But what we ended up finding is that they had almost made it to Goat Island. There's a small island, Milk Island, off of Goat, and found their clothes, their cell phones, their wallets all folded up on the rocks, and they tried to make it to Goat Island and did not make it. Their remains were found the following spring, washed up on Vaughn's Island by someone that was walking their dog. But very, kind of a very emotional time because the families were from out of state, and we had them come to our house, and we tried to comfort them. We had our pastor over to try to help with things, and ultimately one of the parents came to me on Christmas Day when we were about to head off with family and asked me if I would bring them out to the island where the remains were found. And it chokes me up to this day, that experience.
And there's a memorial to them at Cape Porpoise, right? There's like a stone bench that's a memorial.
Yeah, there is a stone bench that the families commissioned so that other people could be aware of what happened and look out at the beautiful place that they spent their last moments.
Very, very sad story, but it is a suitable memorial. I thought it was nicely done. Bob, did you want to ask something?
I sure do. It's in light of what Scott and Tom were talking about. You guys know these waters just outside and inside the harbor as well as anyone. So when we have storms arise, what directional approach concerns you the most in terms of the structures themselves?
Usually, it's stuff out of the south. The south, southeast, southwest. That's when we get we'll get a storm surge, and then we'll get the winds behind it that will end up basically, along with the surge, it will wash over the island. And that becomes a bit unnerving when you're on the island and you look across to the boathouse knowing that you just couldn't get there because there's 3 feet of chop going across the lawn. Or I know Dick used to pull an 8-foot dinghy in the front door and leave it there for the winter. And sometimes before we rehabbed the kitchen, there was a window that looked out to sea, and the waves would hit the back of the house and pop up, and you'd see them in the kitchen window. So as you can imagine, that is one of the more dangerous times to be there because you don't know when the water's going to stop coming up. The thing that's nice is, unlike living on a river where the water continues to rise days after a storm, you know that if you can make it through those crucial hours of high tide, that you made it. But it can be very unnerving because there's very little to nothing that you can do for yourself other than probably go and hunker down in the tower.
Imagine how many keepers and their families had a sigh of relief on those storms as the tide started to.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Absolutely.
So in light of that, you're talking about how tough it is to come in there, boaters coming into the harbor from sea. So just how difficult is it for them to navigate through that confined area between the Folly Island Day Beacon and the Goat Island Day Beacon and the buoys? We got a lot of inexperienced people. What is dangerous about that area?
Well, I probably know that the area is naturally dangerous and can't change that. Unfortunately, it's folks that are inexperienced that don't take the time to look at a chart or have GPS on board or something like that, where they will not go in and start at the entrance of the harbor out at the bell buoy. They'll come in from one of the sides where they're going over ledges and not even aware that they're doing that. During a storm, I don't really care what size boat you have. It is a wild ride through that gut. You just see the boats pitching and rolling, and, there's a quick Hail Mary before they enter it. And fortunately, it doesn't last long because you get into the refuge of the harbor, pretty quickly. But for, several hundred yards, there's an element of danger if you ever lose power. You're on those ledges. And, I always comment sometimes during some of these storms, the waves are huge. They look like Greyhound buses going by. So,
I think too what people inexperienced would not understand is sometimes as wind and tide oppose each other. And what the swirl of that does, and so close to proximity to those ledges. So that, to me, when I looked out at that, when I'm out on the island looking, I'm just like, that has got to be a nasty spot.
It can be, yes.
So then, expounding on just what we talked about, we have in the easy navigation world what we'd like to call the cousins of the lighthouse, and that is the buoys and day beacons. I know those day beacons, they take a beating themselves, they're a little bit bent over and all, but I mean, can you just touch, how important do the mariners, do you see them giving them as much respect? And I know the prudent mariner's always going to actually probably consider the buoys even more important than the lighthouse sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody, sure, I think, has an understanding of what those day beacons and the half-tide ledges they preside over. Do you get a sense of that? People understand that fully?
No, and I guess it goes back to my previous comment with people not starting at the entrance of the channel and coming in from the sides. And over the years, I mean, there are fewer aids to navigation out there now. There was a Whistler buoy that's gone. There's another nun that kind of prevented the boats from coming in from the side that kept breaking loose and ultimately was not replaced. Right now we have a day marker that's in a ledge on the Goat Island side that looks like it's about to fail. And that one is really important. That is literally on the edge of the rocks, and you venture over a little bit further and you're in trouble. So that's actually something I'd want to report and see if that's something that could be replaced, because it's starting to lean way over, and you can tell it's not going to last too much longer.
Oh, day beacons are lifesavers unto themselves. And, I have a lot of appreciation for them because, just from working at Owl's Head Light and seeing some of the half-tide ledges, if you're not familiar, like say at Owl's Head Light coming up Muscle Ridge or Owl's Head Bay, you see nothing. And then it's like just a foot under the water is this ledge, and depending on where the tide will be exposed or it won't be exposed.
Exactly,
and,
yes.
Yeah, day beacons are lifesavers.
Thing. Yes.
So I have a question that either Scott and or Karen can take. And we talked a little bit earlier about your family life on the island, but I'm wondering if you want to say anything more about what it was like raising two sons on that island for those years.
It was interesting, rough, and wonderful.
Amazing.
It was amazing. The day-to-day of being the mom out there, the only water we have is rainwater that's caught into cisterns in the basement. And in the summertime, there's no rain. So we as a family had to lug 30-gallon drums of water out so that we could bathe and stuff. There was never enough water to do laundry, so it was going into the laundromat, lugging the clothes in on the boat, lugging them into the car, back to the boat, out to the island. And the same with groceries. I'd have to bring, we were feeding 2 growing boys, so we needed a lot of groceries. So it was taxing. People ask us how we disciplined the kids when they were growing up. And I don't remember ever having to discipline them because they understood that what we said was law. Mm-hmm. And when the kids were, I'm going to say 8 and 10, we let them go out fishing in the harbor by themselves in the powerboat. And I had a whistle. If I blew the whistle, they came in. There was never any question or anything. And I think that helped them grow up to be the men that they are now. One of them is a PhD chemist working with fusion energy. The other is a
product manager
for Keurig Coffee, has a wife and 2 babies. And Goat Island is what helped raise the kids to be what they are now.
Well, it was, I think, I always use the analogous, it's like living on a small farm. And back in those days, too, I mean, our organization was small. We did everything on a shoestring. I mean, all our furniture was stuff that we got by the side of the road, including lawnmowers. So we had like 3 lawnmowers out there in hopes that we'd get one started for that week's chores. But during late June and into July, so much water condenses out of the air, it's like watering the lawn, that you've got to mow the lawn 3 times a week. It gets really old really quick after 2 days when it doesn't even look like you've mowed the lawn. So the kids were very much a part of the chores. I think gave them, good work ethic. They had responsibilities. As Karen said, they really got it as far as the dangerous aspects of being in a boat. They got really good boating skills early on. And as she said, I think it's really contributed a lot to who they are now. They got to play the trump card a few times, and when they were getting into college, to say that they were lived at a lighthouse, and it always got people's curiosity up. And and they bring people from work. In present day, they'll bring them out there and show them where they grew up, and now they're coming around and being very passionate and appreciative of what they went through. At the time, it was just life, so they didn't, I don't think, necessarily think it was something special, but now they can look back on it and know that it was.
I think the other thing, in addition to the discipline, I would think the island life also gave them a sense of creativity too.
Yes. Both our kids, our older son bought his own lobster boat when he was 13 years old, had 50 of his own traps, and worked full-time on one of the big boats. So he learned the work ethic, and he actually has never asked us for money. He has always made his own way. Our younger son bought a kayak with all the money that he was earning doing lawn mowing and stuff. So he was always out on the rocks, going through the tide pools, going out in his kayak. He's very kind of crunchy granola, and the other son is, and they both had cars that they rebuilt and they raced. But it was just neat to see how different they were.
Yeah, how they thrived on that island and that environment. And I remember circa 1996 when I first visited you and interviewed you with my VHS camcorder, Scott, and with Eric. And I remember thinking how mature he was for his age, and it was just so obvious he loved it there so much. I mean, it was completely obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. To move on a little bit more about the restoration of Goat Island Light Station. First of all, what period was chosen for the restoration? What time period? Usually when you have a central time period you're aiming for with these restorations. What did you choose and why?
I used to frustrate the people because I used to because as part of our deed was that we had to pick an era to which we did any work to. But as an organization, we were still just getting by on a shoestring. So I would tell them I picked modern day era as the time frame, and they would shake their heads. And, you can't do that. Well, as time went on, our organization grew, the support for our organization grew, and we were confronted with being serious about this, and we ended up choosing the mid-1950s as our era to do any of the work to. And the reason that we did that was because in the 1950s and up until about 1962, all the buildings that were ever on the island were there. And we thought that would afford us, if we ever had the opportunity to rebuild the structures, that we could put all of those things back. And that was just such a dream at the time. But lo and behold, as time went on, we were able to start thinking about doing work. We had the windows in the house were failing, the roof was failing, and we needed to get after some pretty serious stuff.
Well, you know what I like about that period of historical significance is obviously we probably know more about that period of time than we would say something maybe 75, 100 years ago. But another
Very
part
true.
is that I think oftentimes the Coast Guard, the heritage of lightkeeping, does not get as much attention, the Lighthouse Service. So I think being able to shine a spotlight on that era as well is really cool. And have the keepers come back,
Exactly. And another couple of perks, I guess, that I can't ignore is there was power out there, and there was modern plumbing. So that made the whole thing a lot easier, but now we're experiencing not having power there anymore. So we'll be working on that.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a couple of minutes. I definitely want to talk about that, the whole power issue for sure. But you just mentioned how you worked towards rebuilding some of the structures out there, and eventually the covered walkway between the keeper's house and the lighthouse tower was reconstructed, and the fog bell tower, which had been gone for quite a few years. And I was there in 2011 for the dedication you had. That was really cool. I took a lot of video at that event. Video I took is on YouTube. If people want to do a search for Goat Island dedication 2011, it's on my YouTube channel. So it was amazing. It was just a great thing to see. So how difficult was it to make all that a reality?
It took a long time. I think we were about 5 years in the permitting process to basically put the buildings back that were there at one time, but there was quite a process to go through, and having to do phase 1 and phase 2 archaeological digs and getting permission from the Indian tribes, and it was pretty vast. But by about 2010, we were ready to start, and we had procured some funding for it. So in 2010, we began, and we rebuilt I think we did the earthwork that first year, and we rebuilt the fuel house where the coal was kept. That's to the left of the keeper's cottage, and we worked on the bell tower, and then we rebuilt the covered walkway and worked on the interior by rehabbing the kitchen, dining, and living rooms to back what they were like based upon some pictures that we had, from that era.
Well, it's also so beautifully done, and the walkway, I think, was built to last through the worst possible weather. We'll hope. Probably stronger than what was there before.
Yeah, most definitely. We did try to take advantage of a little more modern day technology, although it historically looks accurate with the brick piers and the stone foundations. They are capping steel reinforced concrete that's bolted into the bedrock. And we also put hatches in the walkway, much like the fish houses use, so that if you get a super high tide, the hatches will pop open and the structure will fill with water, as opposed to, and hopefully give it the weight to stay there. And also the very center of the walkway is framed ever so slighter than the rest of it, so that if something did have to wash out, if we could just lose the center of it and then just connect the two ends again. Those are the different methods that we employed to try to keep it there as long as we possibly can.
So I don't know if you want to comment on any other major restoration projects that have been completed over the years, and I want to add a part 2 to that question is what's most needed now? Well, aside from the power cable, we're going to get to that in a moment.
Having to replace all 19 windows, and we've replaced the roofs twice. We're always working on, we've rebuilt the slipways a couple of times. We're always working on the floats. We've rebuilt the winch, the cisterns, different pumps and filters, and it's pretty much nonstop, keeping things maintained. And what do we need now, other than power? Lordy me. It is huge.
I would like to see the boat ramp. When you come to the island at low tide, there's no landing on it. We have slipways that go down to the water, but we've lost over the years about 60 feet of the slipways, and there's no way to land comfortably if there's an accident or somebody gets hurt on the island at low tide, because the docks that we have they're not accessible at low tide. So
yeah, with all the visitors, that is definitely a concern. Luckily, there's not too many people out there at low tide just for that reason, but it would pose quite a problem for rescue people if we had a heart attack situation or something like that.
So I'd like to ask Tom a question. How has the community changed its outlook towards the lighthouse? You go from a time period where people remember the lighthouse being staffed, then it's automated for so many years. People turn over, new people come in. How's the community reacted ongoing through all this?
I think the community has a universal love for the lighthouse through all of those years, but seen through a different context. In the early years, the houses that surrounded that harbor were all fishermen and fishing families that had been there for generations. Through the course of time, there's been a transition to where those are, some are seasonal homes, some are year-round homes, some are retiree homes, but the number of actual working fishermen living overlooking the cove has changed dramatically over the years. So to those that were here earlier, the lighthouse was part of their existence in a very personal way. They were on the water. They were going in and out of the harbor. The lighthouse keeper achieved what I always used to call a native status. that they may come and go, but they were somebody essential to the operations of the harbor. And now the lighthouse is largely seen in more of the context of how visually attractive it is to the harbor and not how functional it is to the harbor. And we can see that in some ways. I've been asked in the past if it would be all right if we turned off the light because they didn't like the sweep of it in their bedroom at night, and the foghorn questions about, it's too loud and that sort of thing. And it's not a lot of people. I mean, it's a very small minority, but
sometimes they're the loudest voice.
But there are some exactly. There are some loud voices in that, and some that were successful in a way, and that's very frustrating.
So my second part of the question is obviously it was a ton of work and a ton of struggles over the years, but been a lot of success. How do you keep the community motivated when you have such success? There's a tendency to get complacent. But the project lighthouses are never truly saved. They always have needs. So what are the challenges you see with that, with this new, what we'll call the virtual reality generation that we're living in now?
It's a constantly evolving effort to keep people motivated. And it's not just the lighthouse. The organization owns 2,600 acres of other parts of town, and we're still running projects. We're buying land still. We're creating parks, refuges, that sort of thing. And the islands are part of a larger picture. So it's not just keeping them motivated for the lighthouse, it's keeping them motivated for the work of the entire organization. And fortunately, we've had great success in that regard, but it hasn't come without the challenge of knowing that the people that you're appealing to vision of what you're doing is different. When we started out, the phrase that I would often use was that we're trying to save the community so that your grandchildren will be able to love it as we do now. And to me and those at the time, it meant a lot because we thought my grandchildren will be living here and I want them to know what this place was like and not have it lost. Today, the likelihood is that grandchildren probably aren't going to be living here, so that the appeal isn't the future. The appeal is what is happening right now and what it appears right now. And the challenge is to motivate enough people that they can see that what you talked about in terms of there's an ongoing need all the time. And it's hard because every year we come back and there's a different project. Sometimes there are two major projects in the same year as the same. When we were in 2011, when we were building the lighthouse, another group was involved with us, was also building a garden in downtown to honor Mrs. Bush, Barbara Bush, and other projects at that same time. So the challenge for funding is always ongoing. That's one of the reasons we started the children's program, was that when we realized that kids were on devices more than out playing as we did, we had to find a way of connecting them to the town itself because they had no idea what went down different paths. They had no idea how to get to the islands or some of the basics that we grew up with. And so by starting the educational program, we ran field trips and took them out to these places and made them realize, or had them realize, that these were things they could do with their family on their own, that these were the special places that were a part of their heritage that they should know more about.
So you know what? You just tell the community KCT's light just shines brighter.
Perfect.
All right, so I think it's time we get to addressing the elephant in the room, which would be the power cable to the island. The underwater cable that supplied electricity to the island for so many years has failed recently. First, can you just fill us in a little more detail exactly what's happened with that?
Sure, Jeremy. The cable that has serviced Goat Island was put in the early 1980s, which makes it about 38 years old. And typically, I guess I've heard that the life is around 30 years. So I guess in that respect, we've done pretty well. We didn't really have any indication that we were going to have a problem. So when the lights went out on the night of November 2nd, we got up just kind of expecting that a fuse had blown or something like that. CMP came down that morning, and they were able to confirm that there was power at the pole that was feeding Goat Island, and then they went out and checked the transformer on Goat Island and confirmed that there was no power to that. And because it had been, it was not installed by CMP, it had been installed by the Coast Guard, that they didn't have any of that same type of equipment, and just did not service it. So they did give us the name of a company, On Target Utilities, that came out the following Monday, and they brought a high pot tester with them, which meant basically they could send a really high voltage down the conductors to find out if what their condition was. Initially, we were very happy when we went out to the island. We found a break 212 feet from the oil house where the transformer is, which is around where the docks are. Thought, okay, no sweat. We'll cut out a piece of cable, splice another piece in, and we'll be back, back and running again. Well, all those hopes were dashed when we took that same piece of equipment back on shore, because theoretically we should have been able to send that signal from shore, and it should have measured about the same, or measured the remaining distance when it's sent from shore. But the signal could not and would not make it out there, and it indicated that there were possibly a couple of other problems with the cable somewhere along the line. About 10 or 15 years ago, we had an issue with the cable, and we were able to work around it. So this actually now took two of the three wires in the cable, and they were basically not any good, and which is what led us to the fact that we were going to have to replace the cable and not repair it in order to get power back.
So what's next? Are you measuring various options how to address this issue?
We're in the early stages, but we have a group of trust board members, that have an interest in this. Basically, just started to pull a bunch of different ideas together. How we're going to market this, how do we appeal, for the funds, and what are all our options? Because we spent the last month and a half just kind of getting the word out there. And it's been very good because we've gotten a lot of feedback. I get stopped all around town, and people suggesting different things. And I want people to feel as though they've got a voice, and because they're the people we're also relying on to help support us and continue on with the programs that we have at Goat Island.
The Gulf of Maine class for the past couple of years have been studying ways to produce energy on the island, knowing that the cable was old and knowing that someday we would have to face this. So they've been studying solar and wind power and tidal power and other alternatives to figure out if that's a viable option. And the goal now is to take that information and do a need assessment for the island of how much energy is needed for any given time, and find what works best.
You could have anything from a combination of solar with a diesel generator backup. You could have some wind. You could put the cable back. You could put solar out there and then supply electricity to the grid. The months of December to June. So there's all these different aspects that we're going to be taking a good solid look at. It's going to take time. The real challenge is going to be how do we start next year, because everything is going to roll along the way it always has. We have the Boy Scouts coming out. We have 2 troops coming out in June, and they help us get the island ready for the summer. And it's nice if we can flush a toilet and cook some food and do some of the basics. So we'll probably come up with an interim short-term solution, because even if we went solar, it's not like we can call somebody up and have them put them on, because the roofs are 13 years old on a 25-year roof. So you're talking about having to replace the roofs before you even get to the solar.
And the problem with replacing the roof is?
They're specialty shingles in order to meet the requirement for the historic preservation. And they have to be specially made and shipped from someplace else to be able to get them. So every option has its obstacles. We're going to look at each one of them and try to come up with the most amenable solution that will meet our needs and the community's needs.
To actually simply replace the power cable, to put a new cable there, we're talking, several $100,000?
The price that On Target gave us is, they said the cable would be, just the cable itself, not laying it or anything, would be $60 a foot, give or take $10 a foot. So if you figure it out, it's at $60 a foot, it's 5,000 feet, you're $300,000 for the cable, and then you got to lay it. We have someone to lay it. That's actually the least of our problems. And what they had suggested to me is try to find a cable manufacturer that will sell to you directly. And that's what I've been researching, is who makes cable and how do I get in touch with these people so that when we get to that part of the discussion as our group, we've got that information. And wouldn't it be great to just find a stray roll of cable somewhere that was left over from a ocean crossing project or something where we could pick it up, or it's an obsolete cable, they don't make it anymore. So I'm trying to put the feelers out in that direction now to see if we can really get that cost of the cable as an option, reduced drastically from $300,000.
And as far as an interim solution for next year, maybe one or more generators, is that what you're thinking?
What my initial thinking was that we had an Eagle Scout project that actually was addressing this issue so that we could keep the covered walkway open that we use as kind of a walking museum. Well, I went out last week because my thought was, what if we dedicated those 3 panels to one of these battery banks, like a battery wall, so that you could walk around the house and turn on the lights anytime you wanted to. And then if you needed to run the stove or you needed to, pump water up to the sinks and all that, you could start a generator to do that. So that's kind of how I envisioned it happening. But when I went out to test the panels last week, here are 3 panels that are only 3 years old, and I'm getting no voltage out of any of them. Physically they look fine, but so that concerns me a bit that it's only been 3 years and they're not functioning. What does that mean if we put 30 panels up? But that is just my initial thinking. If we could have that combination of the solar for lights and light, small things, and then the generator to get us by in the meantime. Because the island did always have a generator on it. It had a diesel generator out by the oil house that was removed, when the station was unmanned.
So we used to require everybody coming to the island bring a gallon of water with them. Now it's going to you got to bring a gallon of fuel with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm confident you'll figure it out in the short term and long term. You got a lot of good heads working on this. So look forward to following what happens there. So let me ask you, Karen and Scott, are you still spending a lot of time out there in the summer, like this past season? Were you out there?
At the beginning of the season, yes, but we started a new program this year. We started a Lighthouse Apprenticeship program where we have 9 young local families. They're people that grew up here. A lot of them are actually the kids that came out and played wiffle ball and golf and everything when our kids were growing up. They now have their young families and are about the same age as Karen and I were when we took over. So I thought one of the best ways for people to learn would be to actually live there, encounter, the people, encounter the situations, and it went fabulously well. So this was the first summer we, spent a lot less time. I certainly spent a lot of time going back and forth and teaching and doing things, but I think that, this is a good time to, these are the future stakeholders, of this property and of the area, and they're mature and of an age where they can help out, get involved, and kind of be the next generation. So we're going to continue to stay involved, completely, and try to direct things. But it may mean that we're not on the island, quite as much as we have been for the last 30 years.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to hear about that program. I didn't know about that. That's
too. It's been fabulous.
Yeah, it's excellent planning towards the future. So if we could just touch on public access on the island. If someone, and I'm sure you get this a lot, someone says, I really want to visit Goat Island Lighthouse. I know it's not open as a regular thing to the public, but is there a way people can see it? Can that be arranged?
Unfortunately, we being the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust don't have the resources to be able to conduct rides out to the island. We'd be doing that 24/7. We do right now, between the months of July and August, We probably have between, God, it's really gone up since COVID, between like 1,500 and 2,000 people visit. So a lot of those people are taking advantage of the small kayak companies that are local, Maine Coastal Kayak, and I think Kayak Excursions is another one where people rent. One of them will take people out for tours. The other one will just rent you a kayak. And there's also a tour, eco tours out of the Kennebunk River. Is also, they have a boat that takes 18 passengers, and they have helped us tremendously with the educational programs in the past and transporting students. But during the summer, they will bring groups out to Goat Island, and I've taught them how to give tours, give history, and that. But for the most part, we're just busy, as people come on shore, talking to them, meeting them, greeting them, making sure they're being safe and not doing anything foolish. The summer months, we don't have it's not real strict. I mean, basically the lighthouse is open for people to come and enjoy pretty much every day. And the island is certainly open for exploration 365 days a year. You can go out right now and, and still enjoy the beauty, but just not be able to get into the tower.
One of the things that we've always been concerned with over the years is acknowledging how busy the pier area is. And it's loaded with fishermen. The parking is very, very tight. There are 2 restaurants down there. We've never wanted to complicate it even further with something that we were doing. Our mission is to keep the harbor as it has been, a working fishing harbor, and keep the lighthouse going and watch over them as well. So,
well, I second what you're saying about the parking situation there at the end of the road, at the end of Pier Road there, the harbor. I have brought tours there in my minivan over the years, and sometimes not been able to find a parking space. So it's a struggle from spring through fall. It's a really, really crowded little area, beautiful area, and people can drive there and park there at the end of Pier Road. They get a nice view. It's about a half mile out to Goat Island. It's a nice view of the harbor. 3/4 of a mile? Okay. Scott would know. So he says 3/4 of a mile. And that brings up something I want to just touch on quickly here, Scott. You mentioned before the extreme tides there and everything. At low tide, it's pretty much mud between the shore there and Goat Island. And I believe you, and I think multiple occasions, actually walked that back and forth at low tide. Is that right?
I have walked it many, many times. I don't advise it for most people. You really got to create quite a style to get across there safely, because about halfway across, it's more like quicksand. You've got to have good footwear on that will stay on, and you kind of go like you're race walking and move your arms and slide your feet so you don't get stuck in the mud. If someone ever saw it, I used to have to go to work sometimes, and there wouldn't be enough water for me to get off the slipways, and I'd have to walk to work. And if people saw me coming across in a dress shirt and carrying a briefcase and sliding along the mud, it must have been quite a sight to see. I hope nobody saw it.
The lobstermen probably saw it and got a kick out of it. But so we don't recommend that to people, to try to walk out there at low tide. So we're getting close to wrapping things up here. But Bob, I want to bring you into this because about 10 years ago, the American Lighthouse Foundation awarded the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust its Keeper of the Light Award. And I was there for that. And I'm just wondering if you might want to say a little bit about why that was the choice that year.
Oh, I'm happy to. I think in the lighthouse world today, what we see is when organizations like the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust take over, they're multifaceted in their mission. And we even see from government agencies, some agencies are not very good when they have multiple missions at maybe safeguarding a property like the lighthouse. Well, this organization has done that. This organization has been able to put their focus on all of these facets of their mission. I think that's been awesome. I think one of the things that struck us too is the continuity. You see the people that have stood and guided this organization forward for decades and been at the project. Another part, the adaptive reuse. I think that's so important when you take over a lighthouse. What are you going to do with it? Well, at Goat Island, we can see some of that success. And then two, when you watch the structure they have the keeper's house, the oil house, the lighthouse, that's being safeguarded. And then they're going to go one step further. They're going to rebuild that walkway. They're going to rebuild that bell tower. Those are statements not only for their stewardship, but their care of our history, and that people coming forward can see this type of thing. And then even now, through something challenging like this subcable, I mean, we're going to watch this organization go forward, and they're going to show that being able to stick to it, the passion, the devotion, they're going to figure this out. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap. But, I think that's a lot of lighthouse groups today, not only in Maine, but nationwide, can learn from these types of projects. And, this organization, the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, is a beacon for lighthouse preservation.
Well said. I concur 100% with everything you just said. Yes, absolutely. So I have one final question. This one's for bonus points, all right? And this is for Karen, Scott, and Tom, in any order you want to take it. And the question is, what has been, or what have been, plural, your favorite aspects of your involvement with Goat Island Light Station over the years? Who wants to take it first?
Probably seeing people's eyes when they first come out to the island and they'd never been out there before. The other thing was raising kids out there and bringing their friends out and watching them play like real kids, climbing on the rocks and playing in the tide pools.
No, for sure. I love living a life of yesteryear. It's good, clean, hard-working living. We're doing something that very, very few people are doing now. There's just the abundance of the maritime history of Goat Island, as well as that whole archipelago in Cape Porpoise is just fascinating and so cool to be able to share with people. And I've always viewed it as a giant puzzle because there wasn't just a book to read about all this stuff. So over the years, as we meet some of the ex-keepers and people whose grandfather would keep, and you get all these little tidbits of information that piece this whole thing together. And we're already 30 years into getting these little tidbits. We've gotten a lot, but there's so much more still to learn. And just being able to share the property with people, get young people outdoors, get them involved. I mean, they start learning about some of this shipwreck histories and different things. I mean, their eyes, I can't say, their eyes just open. They get bug-eyed about this stuff and just think it's so cool. Using it for educational purposes has worked out really well. And and it's led to Karen and I going into the school systems and giving talks and lectures and slideshows and that kind of thing, and they're so well received as well. I don't know. It's our way also of just kind of giving back to our community that we love so much.
Having grown up in town, the lighthouse was always such a mystical place. We couldn't go on there most of the time. You could just see it from a distance, but you knew that it represented the history of our town for the last 200 years. And it's seen everything. It's seen the storms, it's seen the sunny days, it's seen the wrecks, it's seen the various ships in the fishing industry as it's evolved over the years. To be able to maintain it is an honor. And it's a symbol not only of our town, but of our state. And it's wonderful to see people's reactions when they're out there and to have the ability to allow access to it that wasn't there before, and the ability to bring it back to what it was in the 50s and allow people to see that. And it's a lot of work along the way, but there's no one on our board or in our organization that doesn't love it and know the responsibility of it and consider it a privilege to be able to do it. So it's exciting and always fun. Maybe not always, but mostly fun.
I can look at the lighthouse, I can look at the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust, and I can say labor of love. And you can see the lighthouse really does, in a way, speak to you, speaks to the heart. And I think that's the biggest treasure of all. If we're going to save these structures, it's that really is going to keep us going with this, because there's some days I know we all want to just throw our hands up and say, you know what? But we never get to that point because it does talk to us, and I think that's awesome.
And next year is our 50th anniversary as an organization, and we just published a 50th anniversary book, and on the cover of that book is the lighthouse, because that's an easy symbol for what we're doing. And above the lighthouse is a rainbow, which spoke to us of kind of those magical moments in the past, but also of the hope for going forward and maintaining these places for generations to come.
Well, this is a really nice summing up by all of you in the last few minutes. And what a perfect symbol of hope, a rainbow over a lighthouse. That's like a double symbol of hope. You can't do better than that. The book, you've just shown us a copy of this new book, Tom. It looks great. And the name of the book is Preserve Forever, is that correct? To Preserve Forever, the history of the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. And I assume that'll be available soon online and so forth?
It will. Copies are $100, and we're using that money to help fund some of the projects that we've been talking about today.
Well, it's a beautiful book, and certainly helps a great cause if people want to get that. And the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust has a website people can learn more from, right? Is that what is the website, Tom?
capeporttrust.org.
So capeporttrust.org. So I want to thank everybody so much. This is just great, and this is way, way overdue. Since I started the podcast in June 2019, this was one of the ones that's been in my mind that I really wanted to do, and I'm so glad I finally pinned you guys down and got here today. So Tom Bradbury, Karen Dombrowski, Scott Dombrowski, and Bob Trapani, thank you so much for taking part in this discussion today. It's getting a little dark and threatening out. There's a storm coming, so I think we've got to end it here. But thank you all so much.
That's all right. They've left the light on.
As Scott mentioned in the interview, you can visit Goat Island through a tour with New England Eco Adventures out of Kennebunk. Visit newenglandecoadventures.com to learn more. That's newenglandecoadventures.com.
Yep. To learn more about the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust and Goat Island Light Station, visit kporttrust.org. That's KPORTTRUST.org. Also on the site, you can order their 50th anniversary book, To Preserve Forever, The History of the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust. So, Bob, any final comments about Goat Island before we wrap things up for today?
Well, I know we've been talking about the underwater cable that's, obviously now there needs to be a new solution for that. And just listening to Tom, Scott, and Karen through this interview, they realize it's a really big job, but they're obviously not backing down. They're moving ahead, they're making the plans. And I think that's what makes their success at Goat Island so amazing is that they keep taking on these challenges head first. And it's not that they're not difficult, but they just keep plugging away, and they got community support. And I'm sure it's not going to be easy, but I'm sure they're going to have an answer to all of this. And the project is just going to continue to shine there out at Goat Island Light Station.
I completely agree. They'll figure out a way to move forward, no doubt about it. Many thanks, as always, to all the volunteers, members, and staff of the U.S. Lighthouse Society. Check out uslhs.org to learn more about all the things the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers, including tours, preservation grants, and much more. Bob, thank you so much again for helping with the Goat Island interview and for co-hosting these 2 episodes.
You're very welcome, Jeremy. I can honestly say I never have an opportunity that I don't learn something from these podcasts and from just working with you. I know when we get to talk about lighthouses, there's always something new that I can learn from these types of things. And you just keep up the great work, because people are not only enjoying this, they're learning, they're getting some value, and they're going to have a long shelf life in helping people beyond this time.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I feel the same way. I learn so much every week myself. I feel like I'm going to school and learning about lighthouses. Lighthouses are one of those subjects where, you can study them forever. And it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So it's so much fun talking to people like the 3 involved with Goat Island and all these dedicated people I get to talk to every week. So I also want to mention that people can learn more about the American Lighthouse Foundation and all its projects at lighthousefoundation.org. Also, Bob, you and your family have a website called Moments in Maine at momentsinmaine.com. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, the family and I, we just have for years enjoyed going out and exploring the Maine coast. And as you know, there's just so much beauty on the Maine coast, you'll never explore it all. And the website is really just dedicated to sharing some of those types of experiences and some of the things we bring together creatively from those experiences. But it's a lot of fun. If people get time to check it out, maybe you'll share in a little bit of that passion for the Maine coast.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention again, momentsinmaine.com. And you and your wife, Anne, who's also Associate Director of the American Lighthouse Foundation, and your son, Dominic, a great photographer, and your two daughters, Katrina and Nina, are tremendously talented. So it's worth checking out momentsinmaine.com and learn about all the talents and interesting projects of the Trapani family. So thank you again, Bob. And as always, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thank you so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.